Hi, I'm Jimmy Aluria here at 3A Automotive and Diesel Repair. We get a lot of questions about caring for engine problems and some warning signs that go along with that. Today I'm going to answer some of the most common questions that we get asked to extending the life and reliability of your vehicle. What are the most common engine problems drivers experience? Some of the most common engine problems that drivers experience are typically running issues where the car is hesitant or it feels like it's running rough. Sometimes that is accompanied by like a check engine light coming on, but not always. Sometimes the car's just not running right and it feels like it's struggling or maybe it's shaking, things like that. Something going on where it just isn't purring the way it should. And when that happens, usually that's the first sign that it needs to get into a shop to have it looked at. What warning signs tell me my engine needs to be checked? Well, the first sign typically on these modern vehicles is that the check engine light will come on. The cars are so smart today that when they have a problem, the check engine light will turn on before you really can even feel it sometimes. So the first signs is typically a check engine light, but that may not happen. So you may have a situation where the car feels like it's running poorly before the check engine light even comes on, or it's hesitant when you go to take off from a stoplight. Maybe it's hard to start in the morning, cranking over and it's starting slowly, and maybe it's running pretty rough for a second before it warms up a little bit. Those are some of the things that would be early warnings that you might need to get it checked out. Why does my engine make knocking or ticking noises? There's a lot of things that can cause that. The modern vehicle, there's so many moving parts inside the engine, on front of the engine, on top of the engine, that it could be several things. One of the more common ones that causes a knocking in Arizona is not having the proper fuel in a vehicle. So sometimes when a car needs higher octane, like the 93 octane fuel, if that in the summertime does not have that proper octane fuel in the system, it'll cause a bit of a knocking noise inside of the engine. Better to get it looked at sooner than later, because sometimes those types of things can be addressed early on before they do any major damage to the vehicle. What does it mean if my engine is running rough or shaking? Now, there's a few things that can cause this. If your engine is running rough or it's shaking, it's a sign that it's not getting proper fuel, proper air, or we've got a problem with the spark plugs or the ignition system. So it could be a multitude of things. Typically, when that type of thing starts happening, you're gonna turn on a check engine light. And so, that's your warning sign to actually get it, taken into the shop right away. But if it's shaking or running rough, it's just telling you that something's out, whether that's a spark plug problem, a tune-up problem. It could be a fuel delivery issue, meaning your fuel pump isn't pumping enough fuel pressure into the system. It could be something like as simple as an air filter. When air filters get plugged up, it'll starve the engine of air, and so it'll start chugging along and won't run like it's supposed to. So it could be several things that's causing the engine to chug like that. Why does my car feel like it's losing power? A lot of times when a car feels like it's losing power, it's typically something to do with the tune-up. If it's not getting the proper amount of fuel into the system, because maybe there's a fuel filter that's plugged up, or it needs a tune-up, meaning that the spark plugs and maybe some other components as part of the ignition system need to be replaced or need to be serviced. A lot of times with a modern vehicle, you have fuel injectors, and that fuel injector is spraying fuel very similar to the shower faucet in your shower is spraying water out. And just like in the shower, when it gets plugged up with calcium deposits and things like that, it doesn't really flow. The water doesn't flow out and stream the way it should. Same thing happens with your fuel injectors, is that they get plugged up with carbon from the fuel, and a lot of times that will cause it to drip instead of spray, and that could make it feel like it's losing power because it's not delivering that fuel efficiently. It's putting too much or too little into the system, and it'll make it feel like doesn't have any power. Another thing that can cause a car to feel like it's losing power is something as simple as an air filter. An air filter being plugged up doesn't allow enough air to go into the system, and your vehicle needs to burn. It needs fuel, and it needs air, and it needs spark. So if any of those three things is struggling, meaning we don't have enough fuel or we have too much fuel, we don't have enough air because the air filter's plugged up, or we don't have enough spark or the proper amount of spark because the spark plugs need to be replaced, any of those things could cause your car to feel like it's losing power. Is it safe to keep driving with engine problems? problems. I would say that it's not necessarily the safest thing in the world to do if you have engine problems, because you don't want to continue driving a vehicle that is showing you signs that it's struggling, because you just don't know when it's going to finally just shut off. And that could be totally fine for several months, several days, or it could just give out on you while you're on the freeway and just decide it's not going to run. And that becomes a safety issue. Or if you have a driving problem and the engine's not running properly, you stop to go to the grocery store, you come out, and the car won't start. Again, in Arizona, if it's really hot outside, that could be a safety issue. So when you have running issues or a check engine light that comes on, it's a good idea to have it checked out right away, and then at least your mechanic can tell you the seriousness of it. One of the challenges with a check engine light coming on and not getting that fixed, the check engine light is your warning sign. And if the check engine light is just on, typically it's not giving you that much of a warning that you're going to break down. Now, if the check engine light is flashing, that's your warning sign. You better get someplace where you don't need to drive anymore or get it to your mechanic, because it could leave you stranded. But if you have a check engine light, and let's just say that it's not something serious, it could be something like, oh, you need to replace your gas cap so the check engine light comes on. The problem with that is if you don't get that fixed, is that your check engine light won't come on. You won't be able to see it because it's already on from the minor issue. You won't be able to see it if it comes on for a major issue that could leave you stranded. So check engine light is usually the first sign that you want to get it into the shop ASAP and at least know what's going on. What causes an engine to misfire? Be caused by a few things. Number one, if it needs a tune-up, meaning it needs spark plugs, it needs the new wires that go to the spark plugs. It might need what they call coils, which are attached to the spark plug. That's what give the spark plugs the energy to fire. Any of those things can cause that. The other thing is a fuel delivery problem, meaning that the fuel pump in the vehicle is not giving the vehicle enough fuel. There's not enough pressure coming from that pump, and so it's misfiring because it doesn't have enough fuel. And the other area is air. There's several air control systems on the modern vehicles, and it could be something as simple as a plugged air filter, or it could be something that's regulating how much air is going into the vehicle that is not operating properly. And so the air situation could be causing it to misfire. So there's several things that can cause an engine to misfire, and the only way you're really going to know that is by having somebody check it out and find out why it's misfiring. If there's a check engine light, it'll give some sort of a code to give direction. It won't tell them exactly what's going on, but it'll give them some direction. And typically they'll have to do other tests to figure out exactly why it's misfiring. Why does my check engine light turn on for engine issues? Your check engine light turns on for engine issues to warn you that there is a problem. So it's just a warning system. It's called the onboard diagnostic system that actually does that. So it's got its own diagnostic system inside the computer of the car that tells you when something's going wrong. It's very similar to our own personal bodies. When we have an ache or a pain or we're not feeling right, we have a warning system that tells us we need to stop doing what we're doing or we need to get something checked out. Same thing with your car. That light is your indicator that your car's telling you, I need to be checked out. Otherwise, we might have future trouble. What happens if engine problems are ignored? I mean, if you ignore engine problems, you're basically taking a chance. Sometimes minor engine problems can go on for several months without leaving you stranded. Most of the time, they'll get progressive fairly fast, and you can have a problem when you least expect it. So if you just ignore engine problems, usually that will spiral into other more serious problems. And let me give you an example of that. So the check engine light comes on, and it is because one of the fuel injectors is putting too much fuel into the system, and it knows that because there's a sensor coming out of the exhaust that says, hey, there's too much fuel going into the engine, you need to get this fixed. Well, it doesn't leave them stranded, the car's still running, and the person ignores it. Well, they ignore it for several months. All of a sudden now, it has another problem, and that is that part of the exhaust called the catalytic converter, which basically is what's burning off all of the excess fumes inside the system. It makes the air safer coming out of the tailpipe. That catalytic converter is not working properly anymore because so much fuel was dumped into that system and it's now no longer working. So that's how, a system can go from something that may have cost a few $100s to fix to now it's something that cost a few $1,000s to fix. How quickly can small engine issues turn into major repairs? Small engine issues are your warning sign, and they can turn into major repairs. Not always, but many times they do. And that could be something as simple as your car needing a tune-up and it not getting that tune-up that then turns later into damage to the top part of the engine because it just hasn't been running efficiently, and there's all kinds of carbon buildup inside the engine that shouldn't be there. And now it becomes a $1,000 repair instead of a $100 repair, or a $1,000 repair versus a $100 maintenance. What does an engine diagnostic check actually do? Well, when your check engine light comes on and your car is not running properly, an engine diagnostic check is not just plugging in the computer, getting a code, and then ordering the parts to fix the problem. It's much more involved than that. What an engine diagnostic check will do is it's testing time. So the technician will hook up a computer, most likely, and they'll see what the computer is telling them. It'll give them a code. But they're also looking at different parameters. They're looking at the way that it's delivering fuel. They'll look at the way that the engine's running. They'll physically go under the hood and actually test different components of the car. They will unhook things and plug things back in to see if it changes. They'll test fuses in the vehicle. Depending on the severity of the situation, I mean, it could very easily take an hour to 2 hours of diagnostic time to find the problem of some simple part. But if you don't do it that way, what people do, and you might have experienced this before, you might have heard of somebody doing this before, is where, you go into a parts store and they tell you, oh, you need this sensor, and they sell you the sensor. And then install the sensor in that car and the same problem still exists. That's because it wasn't fully diagnosed, because that sensor may be showing that it has a problem, but the problem with the sensor isn't the problem. It's the wire going to the sensor that's the problem. So there's an example of where you wouldn't necessarily have to put a part on because you actually tested and you found that the wire was broken, not the sensor. How can early repairs save money long term? Early repairs can save money long term when you're dealing with engines, because the longer you wait, the more severe that problem is going to get. So let's take it, for example, you have something that's going on top of the engine, and there's a noise that you have, and it's because there's one part worn out and it's leaving a little metal behind on top of the engine. Well, we catch that early because it started making a noise, and maybe it's a $800 repair to fix that problem. If that person waits and that metal over several months gets distributed throughout the engine, it could turn into a whole engine repair instead of just one minor repair. So things like that, you want to jump on quickly so that you don't get these progressive problems that end up taking out the entire engine when actually you could have just fixed one minor part of it. I hope this video has helped you answer some questions about the common engine problems and warning signs. If you'd like to schedule an appointment or an inspection, give us a call here at 3A Automotive at 602-997-7978, or just stop by and we'll get you right in. We're here to help you keep your vehicles reliable, safe, and valuable for the long road ahead. Thank you.